So this final video now on A Doll's House picks up at the very end of page 69 and then will continue through to the ending of the play, which is on page 72 of my copy. We've just had this revelation that Nora no longer loves Torvald, if indeed she ever did. The fact that she says now that she will not stay here any longer, that she is leaving him. And his reply is, "And can you tell me what I have done to forfeit your love?" Still all about him, what he has done, notice. Yes, indeed I can. It was tonight, when the wonderful thing did not happen. Then I saw you were not the man I had thought you. Explain yourself better, I don't understand you. I have waited so patiently for 8 years, for goodness knows I knew very well that wonderful things don't happen every day. Then this horrible misfortune came upon me, and then I felt quite certain that the wonderful thing was going to happen at last. When Krogstad's letter was lying out there, never for a moment did I imagine that you would consent to accept this man's conditions. I was so absolutely certain that you would say to him, "Publish the thing to the whole world." And when that was done, yes, what then? When I had exposed my wife to shame and disgrace, when that was done, I was so absolutely certain you would come forward and take everything upon yourself and say, "I am the guilty one." In other words, what she hoped for from her husband was a show of strength. She hoped that he would genuinely bear the trouble which she has borne for this time. And of course, he didn't do it. He revealed himself to be the shallow and the weak man, but also, I suppose, the conformist man. You know, he in a sense is a prisoner of society too here, let's not forget that. He revealed himself as lacking in the imagination to be able to actually see beyond the society's expectations. And so, what then? He exclaims in shock, "Nora!" And she continues, "You mean that I would never have accepted such a sacrifice on your part?" "No, of course not. But what would my assurances have been worth against yours? That was the wonderful thing which I hoped for and feared, and it was to prevent that I wanted to kill myself." Now then is the truth. She believed that by killing herself she would save his shame. He shows now, I think, his lack of imagination, because his only comeback is that "I would gladly work night and day for you, Nora, bear sorrow and want for your sake, but no man would sacrifice his honour for the one he loves." Which of course is a coded way of saying no man can love anyone else more than they love themselves. It's a terrible indictment, but if we're talking about the significance of reputation in this play, then it is an absolutely key one. In terms of his narrow-mindedness, work is his only reply. This is no great man, this is no knight in shining armour, this is no warrior. He is simply a middle-class, pen-pushing, office-working bank manager, and he has fallen short of what she hoped for. Slightly paradoxical, because it's odd that Nora, who is trying to be so rational, simultaneously wanted Torvald to be so dramatic, but nonetheless it is not to be. Nora's response is telling. When he says that no man would sacrifice his honour, her response is, "It is a thing hundreds of thousands of women have done." In other words, women must compromise themselves for men all the time. That's what men demand, that's what society demands, and it is that injustice that she is increasingly coming now to realise. Once again, he says, "Oh, you think and talk like a thoughtless child." Really not helping. Maybe. But you neither think nor talk like the man I could bind myself to. As soon as your fear was over, and it was not fear for what threatened me, but for what might happen to you. When the whole thing was past, as far as you were concerned, it was exactly as if nothing at all had happened. In other words, she entirely conforms to our reading of this. The fact that in that moment of anger, and even more in the hypocrisy with which he tried to row it back afterwards, he revealed his true weakness to her. She goes on, exactly as before, I was your little skylark, your doll, which you would in future treat with doubly gentle care, because it was so brittle and fragile. She's mocking him now, and she gets up. It's instructive that this conversation, which she initiated by them sitting down together, is ending as she leaves the table, leaves him sitting there. Torvald, it was then it dawned upon me that for 8 years I had been living here with a strange man, and had borne him 3 children. Oh, I can't bear to think about it. I could tear myself into little bits. It's the realization that she has given everything up, given up 8 years of her life, and for this. She has given it up for a man as weak, as shallow, as narrow as Torvald. He replies then sadly, I see. An abyss has opened between us. There is no denying it. But, Nora, would it not be possible to fill it up? It's almost as if he hasn't heard her, or at the very least as if he simply hasn't the imagination to understand everything that she has said to him. She says, as I am now, I am no wife for you. In other words, she cannot any longer be his doll. She cannot simply play that part. He says, I have it in me to become a different man. She says, perhaps if your doll is taken away from you. Isn't it interesting that now, suddenly, this whole doll thing, which has been about Nora's subordination all the way through, when she talks about Torvald's doll, suddenly there's a realization that he is no better than a child himself, which I think is really powerful. Throughout this play, he's become increasingly infantile, and especially in this scene, he is no better than a child himself. And when she says, if his doll is taken away from him, meaning that the only way that he would ever change is if he is forced to. He replies, but to part from you. No, Nora, I can't understand that idea. Nora goes out to the right and says, that makes it all the more certain that it must be done. His final lack of understanding. She comes back with her cloak and hat and a small bag which she puts on a chair by the table. I think it was at the beginning of Act 2 we talked about how the presence of Nora's cloak symbolised her sort of toying with the need to, or the desire to leave and to escape. So the fact that it returns now demonstrates just how close she is back to that idea. He replies, Nora, not now. Wait till tomorrow. But she puts on the cloak and therefore symbolises her determination and says, I cannot spend the night in a strange room. The meaning there, of course, I think, a room owned by a strange man, because we've already seen the implication that they don't regularly sleep together, although, as we also said, we shouldn't read too much into that. That was very typical for people who could afford separate rooms at that time. But in other words, she can't bear to live under his roof any longer. And he's pleading with her now, but can't we live here like brother and sister? Nora puts on her hat. With every item of outdoor clothing that she puts on now, it simply emphasises her continued resolve. She says, you know very well that wouldn't last long, meaning, presumably, that she knows that sooner or later he is going to want to return to aspects of the relationship, physically, emotionally, that they had before. She knows that it wouldn't work. And she puts a shawl round her. Again, more clothes. and says, "Goodbye, Torvald. I won't see the little ones. I won't see the little ones. I know they are in better hands than mine. As I am now, I can be no use to them." It's interesting because it's not that she is saying now that she'll take the children away and she'll bring them all up to be good people. She knows, in a sense, that she is condemning herself to be an outsider, and I suppose if she tried to bring her children up herself, she would be condemning them to be outsiders too. So it doesn't seem that she is optimistic for the future of society. It simply seems that she wants only to understand it for herself. She pleads, "But someday, Nora, someday." How can I tell? I have no idea what is going to become of me. "But you are my wife, whatever becomes of you." That old possessive comes back again. Notice again the imperative. "Listen, Torvald. I have heard that when a wife deserts her husband's house, as I am doing now, he is legally freed from all obligations towards her. In any case, I set you free from all your obligations. You are not to feel yourself bound in the slightest way, any more than I shall. There must be perfect freedom on both sides. See, here is your ring back. Give me mine." The ultimate symbol, the returning of the rings, the fact that the marriage is now over. And again, notice this scene began, or this section began, when she was talking about the settling of accounts, and look now at the legal language and the legal concept that she's talking about. This is Ibsen reminding us that she is not the feather brain, she's not simply the skylark, she is not without intelligence. She's trying to free Torvald. She's not wanting anything from him, she simply wants her independence. He continues, "That too, that too. Here it is. That's right. Now it is all over. I have put the keys here. The maids know all about everything in the house, better than I do. Tomorrow, after I have left her, Christine will come here and pack up my own things that I brought with me from home. I will have them sent after me." It's a further reminder, isn't it, that it's not like we can say that the departure of Nora is going to have a physical impact on this house, because as she here emphasises, as a wife in a relatively affluent household, her own role was relatively limited. The house will run itself quite well in her absence. So we can't hold that against her. This is simply about Nora herself. Helma replies, all over, Nora, will you never think of me again?" And she says, "I know I shall think of you often, and the children, and this house." How can she not? He asks her, "May I write to you, Nora?" "No, never. You must not do that." She doesn't want him to have any claim on her. He continues, "But at least let me send you—" Nothing. "Let me help you if you are ever in want." "No, I can receive nothing from a stranger." Now, we could see this as Torvald simply trying to keep contact with her in the hope that he can get her back, that he can reconcile with her and resume life as it was before. But actually, there is a coldness now here about Nora, because in a way she is turning aside all his kind and generous offers. But I think we have to simply see it, that because she can't love him, she can't have any bond with him now at all. In calling him a stranger, that's a harsh thing. He replies, "Nora, can I never be anything more than a stranger to you?" And she takes the bag. We said a moment ago that every item of outdoor clothing that she put on only further strengthened the symbolism of her resolve, and we have it here. The bag, almost the final thing. And she says, Torvald, the most wonderful thing of all would have to happen." And he begs, "Tell me what that would be." Both you and I would have to be so changed that... Oh, Torvald, I don't believe any longer in wonderful things happening. But I will believe it. Tell me, so changed that our life together would be a real marriage. Goodbye. And she goes out through the hall. Notice, a real marriage, not an illusion, not an appearance, not an idealized dollhouse pretense of a one, but a real one, a marriage of equals. She goes out through the hall. Helmer sinks down on a chair at the door and buries his face in his hands. Nora! Nora! He looks round and rises. Empty. She is gone. A hope flashes across his mind. The most wonderful thing of all. But, as if symbolically, to quash his hopes, there is the sound of a door shutting heard below. She has left the flat. She has left the building. She is gone. Now, we've talked about the way that this play ends with this discussion, with this great moral discussion. Now, I think you could, on the one hand, see it as being dramatically a little dull, that it ends simply with a conversation. And yet, if we think about the way that Nora tears apart the framework of their lives together, I think there's huge psychological drama in the action that we see here. And I think it has to be very powerful for anybody who is trying to argue that, in fact, the conditions at this time were, as we said, deeply disadvantageous for women. Now, if we wanted evidence of the shocking nature of this, then I've often said that what writers do and changes that writers make are very instructive. And in fact, when this play was to be performed in Germany, the people putting it on, the producers or whatever capacity, actually refused to do so with this ending, because they said it would simply be too shocking for and too unpopular with audiences. And so, much against his will, Ibsen was forced to rewrite an ending where they did actually, at the last moment, Nora changed her mind. But Ibsen hated it, and all his life he referred to it in very negative terms, because he felt that it betrayed the whole concept that he had for this play. But there we have it. That is the end of A Doll's House. Nora escapes it to go out and seek her identity as an independent woman, not, for the first time in her life, not dependent on the auspices of any man, be it father or husband, or indeed, in the case of Torvald, someone who seems to want to combine the qualities of both. That then concludes our final video on the play. Thank you.